All right. All right, we are now unmuted.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the City of Fairview Planning Commission. It is Tuesday, December 9th, and time is 6:30 exactly. Can I get a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Dew.
Here.
Commissioner Mondero.
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Commissioner Hooper.
Here.
Commissioner Pearson.
Here.
Commissioner Walters.
Here.
And Chair Holcomb.
Present. Thank you. Okay, adoption of minutes from September 23rd, 2025. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes? Is there any comments or corrections? Do you have a motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and 3 seconds to accept the minutes from September 23rd, 2025. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right. Minutes are adopted. Okay. Public hearing. The public hearing on ordinance 01-2026 and land use file 2025-47-TA is called to order. The proposed amendment for discussion this evening is an ordinance amending the City of Fairview Municipal Code, Chapter 19.105, floodplain overlay to adopt the 2020 Oregon Model Flood Hazard Management Ordinance and a pre-implementation compliance measure as required by FEMA. Conduct of the hearing. The order of business we will follow in conducting this hearing will be A, staff report, B, correspondence, C, public testimony, D, additional staff comments, E, questions from the commission, F, hearing closed, no further testimony from the audience, and then G, discussion by commission and a recommendation. Any interested person may present testimony concerning the proposed amendments. Testimony. When you come to the podium, please state your name and mailing address for the record, as this hearing is being recorded. Disclosure. At this time, I would like to ask members of the commission to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest. Please indicate the nature and extent of the ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, and indicate whether you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing. Anyone?
I'm going to state that I do live within a special flood hazard zone. And no, I do not think that is going to give me any partiality in the proceedings here, and will remain unbiased.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge any commission members' impartiality? Nobody? Okay. Staff report. The city staff will now give us the staff report.
Sorry, I'm gonna go out for 1 second.
Good evening, Commissioners. The item before you is the floodplain overlay code amendments.
Is your microphone on, Alice?
Can you hear me now? Okay. The item before you is the set of floodplain overlay code amendments, 2025-47-TA. So in this application, there are 3 portions of it. The first portion is to replace the entirety of our existing floodplain overlay chapter with the 2020 Oregon Model Flood Hazard Management Ordinance. The second portion is the implementation compliance measures as it relates to the Endangered Species Act as required by FEMA. And the third and last portion is the updating the review procedures for development in the floodplain to implement our type 1, 2, and type 3 procedures like you had heard previously in our meetings about this. The three applicable criteria are 19.205 amendments, 19.413 type 4 procedures, and 19.470 for land use district and text. The notices for this, we had a notice posted in the Outlook. We had notified DLCD and Metro with the required 35-day notice. We also sent a Measure 56 notice out to all of the property owners in the city that had a portion of their property within the floodplain. And by noon on the hearing day, we did not receive any written testimony. So going over some of the background information. So the areas of special flood hazard, the SFHA, which we also will refer to as the floodplain, is something that's mapped by FEMA. Any development located within that floodplain is subject to receiving a floodplain development permit from the city in order to determine compliance with our floodplain code. We have regulated development of the floodplain since as early as 1981, and most recently it's been amended in 2019. The city's floodplain code must meet or exceed the federal standards established by FEMA in order to remain eligible for national flood insurance. So here's a map of where these standards apply. So both new and existing floodplain standards only apply to development within the A zone. So that's going to be this blue colored area here. There's a secondary area that's called Zone X, and it's that orange colored area. So if you have a property within Zone X, that just means that it's a less chance of flooding and it's not considered to be within an area of special flood hazard. I did want to note that when we were sending out Measure 56 notices to property owners, we had noticed that some of the properties within Zone X were sent mailers as well. So your property may not actually even be within one of the A zones, and therefore any type of your development wouldn't be subject to these floodplain standards as well. Also wanted to make a note in our research of the floodplain map here. We wanted to note that there are several properties within the Lakeside Estates East subdivision, as well as the undeveloped properties in the Pelfrey South Shore Estates. Those properties, prior to them being developed, they were removed from the floodplain in 2004. The city had applied for a letter of map revision, notifying FEMA that the development of that subdivision had raised those lots above the base flood elevation, and so they were outside of the floodplain. We noticed that the map never was officially updated by FEMA, so notices had went out to those property owners as well, but just wanted to let everyone know that those lots, well, they look like some of those homes are completely in a floodplain, they are actually not within it. The FEMA just had never updated the map for that.
And is it correct that that is just not a standard process that FEMA does for those map revisions based on fill?
Yeah, so when I had talked to a representative from FEMA asking why the map had never been officially updated, they had let me know that there's different tiers of these map revisions. So if the city applied for the letter of map revision based on fill, then the FEMA will take a look at it and it will send letters to all of the affected property owners, letting them know that their properties are no longer within the floodplain. And that kind of serves as documentation that they don't need to carry flood insurance as required by the government. They don't update the map officially with that type of a letter. The city would need to apply for like a higher level of map revision in order to get it officially amended on the map. So it looked like these properties were still within it, but we received some phone calls that those properties, they had documentation that proved otherwise, and we looked through our files and were able to, determine that those had been removed from the floodplain. FEMA just had never updated on their map, and it was kind of just up to each homeowner to know that that was the case, unfortunately. So that happened back in 2004, and the map just was never updated as part of that process, unfortunately.
So going into adopting the 2020 Oregon Model Ordinance, so Fairview last amended its floodplain in 2018, 2019 to comply with FEMA standards at the time. And since then, additional standards have been adopted. The most recent addition is the 2020 Model Ordinance, and it differs from our current version slightly. There's some reorganization of sections. There's some new language to better match the building code, but overall, the content is largely the same. It's just the organization of how the code sections were a lot different. I think by updating the chapter that we have to match the model ordinance as FEMA continues to come out with new changes to their model ordinance, it'll be easier for us to make changes to make ours match theirs. So we don't have to go through all of the information to figure out exactly where these are referenced, since they all follow the same format. I think that would be just a lot easier for everybody and more user-friendly. So some of the summary of changes in the model ordinance, there's some new standards for constructions of garages, tanks, accessory structures in the floodplain. Some definitions were added, removed, or reworded to match definitions listed by FEMA. Some additional permit submittal requirements were also updated, as well as adding the words conversion to into residential and non-residential development, mostly to account for buildings that have went from a residential use to a commercial use, or vice versa, that are also located within the floodplain that wasn't necessarily captured in our current code. So kind of a refresher on the pre-implementation compliance measures, which we refer to as the PICM. So back in 2009, some environmental groups sued FEMA over not consulting with the National Marine Fisheries Services for violating the Endangered Species Act. Fast forward to 2016, they issued a BIOP concluding that the National Flood Insurance Program in Oregon threatens endangered species. They had issued a draft implementation plan to reduce the impact of the National Flood Insurance Program on those endangered species in 2021, and then filed a lawsuit against FEMA, the environmental groups did, for being too slow to implement those changes in 2023. So last year, they required interim measures, and though FEMA is in the process still of going through an environmental study and their final work on their end, and they're hoping to have all of this wrapped up and finalized by 2027. So the PICM is kind of the interim measure, and they're hoping that by 2027, it's officially implemented and we would be all good to go. So going over the different PICM options, they had offered everybody 3 different options. The first one was to adopt a model floodplain ordinance that considered impacts to fish habitat and required mitigation to a no net loss standard. In our consultation with the city attorney, they had determined that that model ordinance did not follow the Oregon requirement for clear and objective standards and would violate state law. So option 1 was off the table. Option 3 was to just issue a prohibition on all new development within the floodplain. And so option 2 is the choice that we ended up going with a modified version of that, is to look at each proposal on a permit by permit basis and to require floodplain habitat assessment and mitigation documents to be submitted by the applicant. So option number 2, it's places the burden on the applicant to demonstrate compliance with this. The applicant needs to certify that they have obtained a floodplain mitigation assessment demonstrating how the development may achieve no net loss of key floodplain functions. And when no net loss is mentioned, that's essentially if you are going to be impacting a certain square feet of floodplain habitat, you are required to mitigate that so that your development causes no negative area of floodplain. You need to be able to provide other areas on your property that now function as a floodplain. That you have to have the development certified or covered by another formal consultation, or it's already been addressed by an existing habitat assessment, or the proposal is one of the exempted activities on the list. The city doesn't need to necessarily evaluate whether there is no net loss. That is on the applicant that hires a professional that's certified in a certain field, that they provide us documentation stating that they have achieved no net loss, and we take a look at the application, the evaluation, and take it as is. So we had to add a new chapter for that no net loss in the specific Pick'em section, which is going to be the new 19.105.080. That defines exactly what the floodplain mitigation assessment is. It references the FEMA guide for it. It also defines the list of qualified professional credentials that we would accept to provide with the application for any development. It also lists the type of development that are exempt from the assessment, including maintenance, landscaping, restoration, and utility work. And the final phase is the one that we had talked about previously. So currently, any type of development in the floodplain requires a conditional use permit, which is always going to be a type 3 procedure with a planning commission hearing. As you might recall, that was the subject of the Tesla vehicle chargers in the Target parking lot we had the public hearing for, even though technically weren't located in, it was listed as it was in a floodplain, but the work was so minor and in an existing parking lot that it could have been done at a staff level review if the code had been different. So we're proposing to add changes to that section so that development type matches the review procedure. So things that only require, say, a building permit, we would just process the floodplain permit as a type 1 staff review, which wouldn't require public notice, it wouldn't require a hearing. Obviously, more major development like construction of new commercial or industrial buildings in the floodplain require a type 3 site design review already. So the floodplain permit would just be combined with that as well. We figure that that would make things easier for applicants that are doing minor work within the floodplain for us to be able to not have to go through the public hearing process. It would save applicants money and time through getting, projects done. Staff's recommendation is that the commission recommend approval to city council of the proposed amendments as shown in attachment A to the ordinance. And here are the list of the 3 alternatives for you. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Alex. All right, correspondence. Have you received any correspondence on this matter other than those items included in the agenda materials? And I recall you said no. On piece of testimony. All right, so number 7 is the public testimony. Does anyone wish to speak in support of the amendments? In support? Does anyone wish to speak in opposition to the amendments? Okay, hold on.
I'm undecided, so just want to add some questions.
Is there any further testimony or any further questions from the audience? All right, Bob. Please state your name and address for the record.
So my name is Robert Dolphin. I reside at 4052 Northeast Federal Way, Oregon 97024. And so one of the reasons I'm appearing is I'm the volunteer manager of Fairview Lake under the intergovernmental agreement between City of Fairview, Government Flood Safety and Water Quality District, and the Fairview Lake Property Owners Association. So I thought that this matter was so involved with Fairview Lake, I should come and extend it. And one of my questions I have is, since you're putting the burden on the applicant, I just have a question, maybe thinking Alex in the research here, since salmonids cannot make it to Fairview Lake, because it's a controlled floodplain that attached to flood studies, what scope do you think that, that term, the study that the applicant is required to provide, how detailed do you anticipate that being, since salmonids cannot make it to the lake? And that's probably the most likely ESA candidate that would possibly be in the lake. So that was kind of my question, what do you view as being a burden on the applicant? They're going to pay $10,000 for a consultant to do some 40-page study, or do you see it being salmonids cannot make it to the lake? There's no impact.
That's a good question.
My question.
All right. The staff, no. No.
So I guess I don't anticipate, it depends on what the scope of the development is. I think how in-depth the floodplain mitigation assessment, that's the term for the assessment, would need to be. And, you know, it's as stated in the code, the assessment needs to identify existing site conditions before development, describe the impact that proposed development would have on existing floodplain functions within the applicable portion of the site, and then identify the mitigation needed for the proposed development to result in no net loss of those floodplain functions. And, you know, no net loss means the adverse impacts to the floodplain functions are either avoided or offset, so there's no net change from the existing conditions. So, and, you know, this would only apply if future development happens within the floodplain area. So, of course, even though the proposal for the code isn't to prohibit development in the floodplain, a property owner could choose to just avoid alterations within the floodplain area, with the exception of the list of things that are exempt from that, which would be mostly around like landscaping and habitat restoration, maintenance of structure if it doesn't add increase the building footprint area, as well as maintenance of sidewalks and streets, same thing, as long as it's not expanding the footprint of those areas. So, you know, yes, it does add an additional requirement onto the applicant to demonstrate, you know, through a qualified professional, which is somebody that has a bachelor's degree in wildlife or fisheries, habitat biology, or a related degree in a biological field from an accredited college or university with 4 years of experience. That's kind of how it's defined. So you do need to find somebody with those credentials to prepare the information for you. Again, if you want to do certain type of development in the floodplain area.
And would a dock qualify? A dock between that's most likely what was built in the floodplain by a resident around the lake.
So if you were going to float your dock in the lake, the city has not previously issued floodplain development permits for docks on Fairview Lake, however. So it would, I guess, depend somewhat on the scope of your dock and your approach. But if you were just going to do kind of a floating dock, that's not something we've required a floodplain permit for.
Does that help out?
That's all, and that's what I should attend.
Well, again.
Does anyone else wish to?
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Gene Herford, 17809 Northeast Marine Drive, Portland, Oregon. I just have a question on the floodplain. Is there a around the floodplain that expands it to keep, you know, like a wetland or a waterway? There's a setback, so is there a setback in addition to the floodplain?
There is not.
So I'm thinking.
All right, thank you, Dean. Anybody else? No questions?
Maybe I can just add, however, in response to Mr. Herford's question, that in addition to the floodplain, we do have natural resource overlays, which are regulations around the lake, Fairview Lake, and streams and wetlands. And so there is going to be overlap between those two. And so it's possible that the city's natural resource overlay, which is a different section of the municipal code, may extend a buffer with regulations past the edge of the floodplain.
Okay. Staff comments. Does the staff have anything to add which specifically addresses a question raised during the testimony? You jumped the gun, so, right? Was that the only comment?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay. Thank you. Questions of clarification. Does any member of the commission have any questions regarding clarification of the testimony to this point?
I have one question.
All right.
Sarah, did you clarify, like, how development or any development, or let's just take something simple like in addition to residents in the floodplain, like how that would impact that floodplain area? Like what would, I mean, you could add on to your house that would trigger a report, right? But how would that impact the floodplain? Or just give me an example.
So I think, yeah, with that particular question related to the no net loss in floodplain function, what it would likely mean is that you would have to enhance the same area, the same square footage of your property where you are building a building in the floodplain, so that or there may be some way to do a smaller area of enhancement if you can do a more substantial, restoration of that area, so that the structure in the floodplain, which will, after development, not provide any floodplain function, right? It's sort of encroaching into the floodplain. So that wouldn't have a negative impact, because elsewhere on your property, you're making up for that negative impact and maybe absorbing additional floodplain waters and providing habitat in that area. So it may be, if you choose to build in the floodplain, that you have to do some additional enhancement on your property to offset that.
Like what?
Like, for example, if you may need to do, like, let's say you just have lawn that leads into the stream on your property. Perhaps you would need to enhance that area to provide more native vegetation or area for the floodwaters to go, instead of the area that, previously the floodwaters could extend into the area that's now a building.
So if I hear you right, the concern is that if you expand your building, your house, then that becomes another area where flood insurance would be affected or impacted, because you now went into that floodplain with more of your building.
Sure, and that's not change, this code amendment isn't necessarily changing how flood insurance would apply. It's just adding a new requirement in terms of making sure that the sort of environmental function of the floodplain isn't lost when you develop within the
I'm just
floodplain.
having a hard time, like, wrapping my brain around how that affects the floodplain. If a river rises and you add onto your building, and if the whole building is in the floodplain and you add onto that building, it's still all in the floodplain. So is it the materials that they're worried about? I mean, what is it that is driving you having to do something by adding onto your building that triggers a report or triggers some type of mitigation?
So this is really the new requirement, the the PICM, the pre-implementation compliance measures. I mean, it's coming out of concerns about impacts to endangered species. So that piece is really about habitat and making sure that you're.
Fish and animals?
Right, exactly. Yeah, wildlife habitat, I guess. Fish habitat, exactly. So that, as more new development happens in the floodplain, the amount of habitat isn't going away.
So the fish would be impacted by the flood, and your building being in the floodplain, the fish would be impacted by that building or other habitat.
potentially. Again, these are FEMA requirements.
Yes.
Yeah, and of course, the alternative would be, you know, to not do additional development in the floodplain area.
If you don't want to add on to your building at all.
Sure, sure, exactly. Build up or build in the direction or in a portion of your property that's not within the floodplain. And really, when we have the map, if there are questions, we could look at it, the map link that went out with a public notice. But there really isn't a whole lot of property in Fairview that's in the floodplain. So impact, I mean, there are some larger areas of, you know, of properties, but in terms of residential areas, it's fairly limited.
Any other questions?
Here.
Okay.
Alex or Sarah, what is the latest that FEMA has come up with these maps? Notice how she made a comment there, not very forthwith in updating a lot of these things. If you go online and pull up a particular area, it showed you the floodplain and what zone you're in. Has that changed significantly, say, when I printed this one in 2020?
Not to my knowledge. I think the most recent map amendment for like a citywide, at the citywide scale, I think was 2019, I believe. There's some areas in the city that say around the intersection of Halsey and 223rd, there was some culvert work done by the city that kind of reorganized how the water flows under that intersection that we had applied for a map revision. So that specific area of that project was revised, but it's like a citywide thing. I think 2019 is the last large scale map change that they had done for it. So.
And in lieu of FEMA actually updating their maps, does the city actually have maps of any changes that, like you mentioned earlier, had proposed, but FEMA just hadn't got around to it for the same reason a lot of us who are within the Fairview Lake area received notification, but yet we are actually in Zone X, which doesn't apply to.
Yeah, we follow the same map that they do as far as when they release theirs, we update ours. We kind of go hand in hand. So that's why a lot of our map was sent out to people within that Zone X, and it just hasn't been updated since.
I mean, looking at the existing map that I have here, most of the properties are in Zone X. There's very little of it that's in A.
Correct. I think the assumption is most modern subdivisions built within the last, say, 20 to 25 years, most developers build without, outside of that floodplain area and have kind of crafted their subdivisions to kind of follow contour lines that are outside of that area just to avoid complications of building within the floodplain. So I think that's kind of, any newer area is going to probably be outside of that Zone A.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Alex, are those FEMA maps or are they Corps of Engineers? Or are they one and the same?
FEMA.
Yeah.
Other questions?
I have just a comment.
Okay.
I read through these changes, and I just want to commend you guys. That was a lot of work to delete and then rewrite the entire section. I mean, it was a lot of reading. Therefore, it was a lot of work in getting it in there and doing the edits and all that. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Last call for questions. Okay. If there are no further questions, I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing. Cool. Yeah. So the public testimony portion of the hearing is now closed. Oh, I gabbled too soon. Is there any discussion by the commission? Do we need to discuss anything? Roger? Oh, okay. I'm seeing a lot of heads shaking, despite my glasses not being on my face. So, consider the ordinance. Are you ready to consider? Yes, okay. So here are the three alternatives. Do I hear a motion?
I move we go with alternative one, recommend the city council adopt ordinance 01-2026 with staff recommended code amendments in attachment A to the ordinance.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to recommend city council adoption of the ordinance. Shall we do a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Dew,
Yes.
Commissioner Mondaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson,
Yes.
Commissioner Walters,
Yes.
and Chair Holcomb.
Yes. All right. Recommended.
I wasn't looking, who seconded that? Okay, thank you.
You don't have our voices memorized? Okay. What's next? Wow, tentative agenda.
Okay. So thank you for, first of all, rearranging the schedule to meet in the middle of Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays this evening. So in January, we'll return to the second Tuesday of the month for the regular schedule. And we have a text amendment application from a property owner in Fairview with a proposal or a request to amend the development code as it relates to residential care facilities. In terms of the review procedure, the permitted location. So we will be bringing that forward. That application was deemed complete last week. And so we'll be holding a public hearing on that application on January 27th, and then it will be moving forward for council consideration in February and March. So that's the agenda for the next meeting. And then February 24th, the following meeting, we're planning to bring forward our tree-related updates. We tried to solicit residents, community members to be on this tree task force, but really did not get much interest. So we will be inviting those people and other community members to provide input in the process, but we'd like to review everything with the Planning Commission, kind of function in that advisory role before we bring it forward to the City Council, which we're planning to do in March. So I can talk a little bit more about that work and the commission and staff updates, but that's what we have on the docket for January and February.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, and thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight and listening to our really interesting discussion about floodplain pre-compliance implementation measures. So now we're going to talk about commission and staff updates. So unless you're super interested in that, you may be excused at any time. Tree update work and outreach plan.
All right, so Alex and I have been meeting with some fantastic members of the Oregon Department of Forestry. They're community assistance foresters, and they basically serve to help communities around the state with tree-related work and outreach and education. So for kind of the technical side of things, to put together some recommendations for review, we reached out to them, and Alex has been taking the lead in this work, and we've met 2 times so far. We went on a tour in Fairview and looked at some different street trees. We talked about our existing street tree lists and the permitted trees that can be planted. looked at some other examples of what other communities are doing, and they're actually developing their own sort of template permitted tree list from the Oregon Department of Forestry. We've talked about standard planting details for trees, and we've reviewed the sidewalk and street tree section of the municipal code, which is chapter 12. And we're meeting again this week, and we'll be reviewing some draft changes to that chapter 12. So that talks about how you need, it talks about replacement of street trees, which is in the code now, that if you remove one, it needs to be replaced. It also talks about vegetation management in the right-of-way, and kind of assigning responsibility. But we're updating it to make it more explicit and easier to follow. The city is also working on a larger project to update its public works standards and details. So these are things that contractors would use if they're doing construction and they are doing work in the public right-of-way. So it gives them a specific drawing and specifications for the work. We don't have any of those standards for street tree planting or any tree planting. So we're looking at putting one of those in place as part of that process the city's going through. So we've looked at that. We've also talked about emerald ash borer and the impact on the community and some potential resources that are available, because we do have stands of ash trees and a lot of ash trees along riparian areas in Fairview. So we'll continue talking about that, and there is somebody, a community assistance forester, who's kind of an expert in that area, who's providing some advice to us. So it's been a really great process so far. I think I've been learning a lot personally, which has been exciting. They'll continue to work with us and are also available to help with public outreach and events. So we talked about potentially doing some tree education events coming up this year, like pruning, how to properly prune a tree, maybe a tree planting event as well. So we'd like to get those scheduled, maybe also doing an ivy pull event. I know we have some people with experience in that on the commission who might want to participate. So we're going to be coming back to the commission, as I said, in February for a work session to kind of present a bunch of information that we've been working on and have put together, as well as some draft changes. And we'd also like to do some community outreach in February to give the community an opportunity to learn about what we're doing and to weigh in on it, on things, in particular items like the species of street trees and what we should have on our approved list, including a couple of areas in Fairview where there is one approved street tree on specific streets, like in Fairview Village. On Village Street, you have to plant a pink flare cherry tree currently. There are other areas of Fairview Village where there's a paper bark maple, others where it's a city sprite Zelkova. So that's one thing that we're going to be reviewing, but would like to get input from the residents in this area in terms of how should we expand or change those lists. And there was also an idea to bring in some experts to just kind of have a little forum and talk with the community about community trees and forestry and maybe some history of Fairview as it relates to trees, to just kind of help build that interest and get people interested in signing up for some of the community forestry related events that we might do, like an ivy pull or a tree pruning workshop. So wanted to just kind of share that information with you and see if you had any suggestions or any feedback.
Are the people from Department of Forestry, are they familiar with the geology of part of the area of Fairview? I'm specifically talking about Fairview Lake Estates where you've got concrete as soil.
Yeah, that's a really good point, you know.
Important when it comes to tree.
I don't think we've talked about that specifically, about the soil, so I will make sure to bring that up, but we know we have talked generally about the importance of having a lot of soil volume for growing trees, but thank you for noting that.
Yeah, because it's a problem in our neighborhood with trees that they planted originally aren't made for that soil type. And so that causes sidewalk problems, which causes the expenses to residents.
Roger?
Sarah, have you looked at Gresham's tree, approved tree list? And
Yes.
how closely does Fairview mimic that one?
Ours is very different from theirs right now.
It's very extensive.
Theirs is very extensive, like almost like it's just the list of all the trees you could get at a particular nursery. So we're looking at that, and I really like how that is organized, their tree list also, because it tells you which trees are good for planting, like as a street tree or as a buffer tree or a parking lot tree. It organizes them by planting space, and it talks about which ones are suitable for under overhead wires. Yeah, so, yeah, I think that's definitely one that we're kind of looking to see how we might, kind of organize it in a similar
I
way.
mentioned that, yeah, it's pretty thorough in terms of which trees are best
Yeah,
in certain areas.
yeah.
In permaculture, there's this thing called planting guilds, where the tree has like other plants that go with it to support the tree or, like do different jobs. And those include different herbaceous plants and different like shrubberies. So that might be a kind of thing, like here are some recommended things that go with these trees. If they're a buffer tree especially, maybe not street trees, but if I were you, I would look into planting guilds.
That's fascinating. I have not heard of that before. Have you, Alex? Yeah. Okay, good, thank you.
Other comments?
Not at this time.
No? Okay.
Great. And Alex, do you want to give a little update on the Tree City USA application?
We're currently aiming to apply for the Tree City USA certification by, I think it's middle of this month. So we're coming right up on it and should have our application in the next few days.
Okay, good. Yeah, because didn't we need to do like all of the things and the declaration all in the same?
Yeah, it had to all be like same calendar year. We did the declaration in April. It just has to be, that was kind of the last portion of it that we were missing. So we're all good to go to submit that application, and I've been working on it.
Thank you. All right. Does the commission have any updates? Staff have any other updates? Sorry.
Well, I was going to share the update that our Public Works Director, John Miyama, has announced his retirement. So he made the announcement in November, and he's going to be retiring at the end of this calendar year. So the city is currently recruiting for a new Public Works Director. We're doing the recruitment just ourselves right now, not with a recruitment firm. And so hope to find some great candidates. There'll be tough shoes to fill. John's done a tremendous job since he came on board a little less than 2 years ago. So I think that's, from a staffing perspective, the biggest update that we have right now. The city's been working on hiring other positions and refilling positions, so that's been really busy over the last year probably. But we are continuing to move forward, and I think getting more candidates, more qualified candidates applying for jobs, which is great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, John will be missed.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's been really great.
Yeah. And then I was just going to share a couple of updates on other projects. So 2 transportation planning projects have been going on over the last year plus. There's the Transportation Safety Action Plan that Multnomah County's been leading in coordination with all of the East County cities. And this is really a plan with specific recommendations and actions and funding recommendations to reduce the number of serious injury and fatal crashes in East County. So focusing on high crash corridors, Halsey Street is one of them, and what types of improvements can be done to improve safety on our roads for all users. So that's wrapping up. The East Multnomah County Transportation Advisory Committee, which is made up of elected officials, will be reviewing that and considering an endorsement coming up next week. And then it will be heading to all the individual cities for the city councils to also adopt the plan. And then another transportation planning project, the Safer Sandy Boulevard project, is we now have a draft sort of plan or map that we're reviewing that shows an updated cross-section, locations for new enhanced crosswalks for the future. And the last set of survey results are in. About 500 people responded to the last online survey. And we'll be doing one final survey in January before the project is complete. But we'll be doing a work session with the city council coming up this Wednesday where we will be sharing the plan and getting some feedback from them before we make final changes and go out to the public.
Oh.
Yeah, but that's exciting to see that moving ahead. And then the last thing, on January 7th, someone from Metro will be coming to present the Blue Lake Park plan to the city council. So this is an effort that's been going on for a couple of years with bond money that Metro has had to kind of really take a new look at Blue Lake Park and come up with a plan for investment. So that project is kind of wrapping up this spring, and there's a plan for what they hope to construct during the first phase with the funding they have available for construction.
Wow.
So if you're interested in tuning in to see what's coming for Blue Lake Park, tune in or come to the meeting on the 7th of January.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's been in the works a long time.
Yes.
You guys have been really busy. Are there any other updates?
I guess I could stop sharing this.
Okay. Now, do we have any updates? We thought of anything? No? No? Nothing down here? Yeah?
Yes, my tour ended the end of this month, but I've been reappointed to the commission. So you're stuck with me for another couple of years at least.
Great.
That's good to hear.
Glad to have you, Rob.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. Well, I don't have any updates, so if there's nothing else, do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn.